Where's my cheese roll? Someone's taken my cheese roll. I left it there. You been thieving?
I took your cheese roll, Lenny.
You took my cheese roll?
Yes.
I made that roll myself. I cut it, put the butter on, sliced a piece of cheese, put it in between, I put it on a plate, and I put it in the sideboard. I did all that before I went out. Now I come back and you've eaten it.
Well, what are you going to do about it?
I'm waiting for you to apologise.
But I took it deliberately, Lenny.
You mean you didn't stumble on it by mistake?
No, I saw you put it there. And I was hungry, so I ate it.
Barefaced audacity. What led you to be so vindictive against your own brother? I'm bowled over.
The Homecoming came through my letterbox in 1965. I had a relationship with Harold Pinter because he'd given me the birthday party when he was an unknown dramatist, and I couldn't do it. But by 65, I was running the Royal Shakespeare Company and very much looking for a modern play which had the kind of verbal precision and the formal qualities that being a classical actor does. So from that point of view, technically it was terrific. I was very, very struck by the play on the first reading. I think it's a big, epic play about the family, and the metaphor of the family, I think, is something that we all can easily relate to. Its tensions and its secrets and its blackmails and what is unsaid. And The Homecoming is full of what is unsaid. I think the coming of Pinter in the wake of Samuel Beckett and the particular kind of theatre of understatement which he developed through his uses of silence and pauses, and where silence can be as eloquent as a line, made the audience use their imagination so that they try to read the interior life of the characters. I think this is a step in drama, and of course Pinter is very funny. It's often black humour and it's often shocking humour, but he's very funny. Now, I didn't find the play odd. I found it powerful, persuasive, and very disturbing. And of course, it doesn't have a trace of sentiment in it. It's very unblinking in its analysis of the cruelties we inflict on each other, even in a family. The play doesn't seem so controversial now. I think the unblinking cruelty and pain of the play still gets to people. It disturbs people. I think if people don't know what's going to happen, they're fairly amazed.
You go in, Teddy? Already? Well, when are you coming over again, eh? Look, next time you come over, don't forget to let us know beforehand whether you're married or not. I'll always be glad to meet the wife, honest, I'm telling you. Mind you, she's a lovely girl. A beautiful woman. And a mother, too, a mother of three. You've made a happy woman out of her. It's something to be proud of. I mean, we're talking about a woman of quality. We're talking about a woman of feeling.
We did the play in London in 65, 66. We did it on Broadway, I think 67. It was about 72, 73, some years later, that we made the film. And I was approached by the Landau organization and this American film theater, the idea of filming plays. I'm not for filming plays. I think plays exist because they're projected and spoken and given to a live audience, and there's an interplay between the actor and the audience, which is once and once only and very precious because it changes from night to night. That's not to say that I think theatre is better than film, or film is better than theatre. I think they're two absolutely different things. In the theatre, you use your imagination. You know that it's not a real room in North London, in The Homecoming. When you go to the cinema, you believe that what the camera saw actually existed, actually happened. So you want there to be, you're not going to imagine a bare stage is a room in Hackney. You want a room in Hackney. So the film, although wonderfully illusionist in the sense that we can cut and move from one image to another, is absolutely based on reality. And you frighten the camera if you ask it to imagine something which it's not seeing. Audiences don't do that. So I would regard this Homecoming neither as a play nor a film. I believe and think, and I tried to make it, a play which uses certain techniques of the film in order to express a play. Now, if we'd brought 4 cameras into the theatre and hoisted them up and done a record of the play, it would have looked stagey and unconvincing, and you wouldn't have believed anything. I hope that what we've done is create a surrealistic style which enables one to believe that it is, and it is more than it is. I mean, it's got the longest staircase of any house in London, for instance. It's a very bare and extraordinary room. It's the way it's shot is, in that sense, slightly stylized, but not very much, and not as much as the theatre was. I felt very secure about it as a project because Harold Pinter's not only a great dramatist, he's one of the best screenwriters in the business. And I knew from just a very brief conversation with him that neither of us wanted to open it out in the conventional movie sense, and that we wouldn't. I mean, the only thing that we do in the film is we go outside the house twice in order to see the taxi arrive, in order to see them arrive, and to see Ruth walking in the middle of the night down this deserted street. And we go once to Lenny's bedroom, where he's listening to what's going on, which is a surprise shot because he's living in modern splendour in the middle of this tumble-down Victorian Hackney house. So but in any conventional sense, it wasn't opened up, and of course not a line of dialogue was changed or altered or anything. But when I was approached about it, I was naturally anxious. First of all, I didn't believe it could make a film, and still don't, in the sense of opening it up. You'd have to go to Heathrow and see them arriving and get the taxi there and so on. I mean, and why would you go with Joey, I suppose, to the boxing establishment where he trains? I mean, these things would all dilute the claustrophobia of the film, and it is that sense that all these passionate warring people are shut in this house, shut in this room, is really what gives it its edge. And I was also obviously worried about the actors bringing down the performance to the right level for camera, and by doing that, not losing the verbal and cruel intensity of what they're saying. It's a very clear distinction here, as far as I'm concerned. An actor on the stage has to play to the audience and tell the audience. He obviously has to project his voice a little bit in order to be heard in a 1,000-seat theatre, which is quite a different level of volume to what you would use in a room. And in a sense, he's aware of the audience, he's manipulating the audience, he's telling the audience what he wants them to imagine. Now, if you do that to the camera takes fright, and you're revealed as someone who is bullying the camera and insisting on something, and you look over the top. The art of great screen acting is to hide and to make the camera beg to see what's going on. The camera comes closer and closer to your heart to try and understand. Now, the problem of filming The Homecoming, one of the great problems, I thought, was how we could get the verbal intensity without being over the top. And I think we succeeded.
What kind of a son were you wet wick? You spent half your time doing crossword puzzles. We took you into the butcher's shop, you couldn't even sweep the dust off the floor. We took McGregor into the shop, he could run the place by the end of the week. Well, I'll tell you one thing. I respected my father, not only as a man, but as a #1 butcher. And to prove it, I followed him into the shop. I learned to carve a carcass at his knee. I commemorated his name in blood. I gave birth to 3 grown men, all on my own bat. What have you done? What have you done, you tit?
Do you want to finish the washing up? Look, here's the cloth.
So try to get rid of these feelings of resentment, Sam. After all, we are brothers.
I think the play of The Homecoming is dominated by Max, the character of Max the butcher, this violent, retired butcher living in a house which has expunged all softness, all trace of femininity, because his wife had betrayed him. He is male, sarcastic, belligerent, in many respects a dreadful man, nearing the end of his life and still fighting like a great resentful bull. We were very fortunate in having Paul Rodgers play it on the stage and in the movie, and I think his performance fulfills Harold's desires, but also I think it dominates the film, and so it should. I had a very strange experience over that, actually, because when we were going to shoot it, Harold Pinter said to me, "You must come to Hackney and see the sort of house that I was thinking of." And we went for a walk down this street, and it was the street where we subsequently filmed the arrival of Ruth and Teddy. And as we walked past a house, an old man came out with a walking stick and a cloth cap and a cardigan, wearing sneakers, trainers, and said, "Harold, my boy, how are you? Come in and have a drink." And we went in and had a drink, and I was introduced. And Harold said, "And how is Moisha?" And we heard how Moisha was, and he was a professor of literature at a Canadian university. And my head was buzzing, because I thought, is this how The Homecoming happened? Is this the story? And I said to Harold afterwards, "Is this how it all started?" And he said, "Right, how it all started, but it's some of the triggers, certainly." And I said, "Well, is it the same story?" He said, "No, certainly not." But what really shook me was that I don't remember a moment when we said to Paul Rodgers, "Why don't you wear tennis shoes and a hat and carry a stick and wear a cardigan night and day?" How did that evolve? I don't remember the designer saying that, or me, or Harold Pinter. But there he was, the same Max as we met in Hackney. One of the things that we had to face was that I asked David Watkin, brilliant lighting cameraman who worked with us, if I could have real depth of focus so that I could hold two shots so that everybody was sharp and we didn't have to decide who was in focus. And he got that by lighting at a huge intensity, and the key light was a light through the window of the house, which was provided by a World War II searchlight, which he found from somewhere, and the heat was just awful, and the actors used to run into the set, do the take and run out again. I mean, you couldn't stay on the set. But it's what gives it its peculiar and extraordinary look.
He was very fond of your mother, Mac was. Very fond. He always had a good word for her. Mind you, she wasn't such a bad woman. Even though it made me sick just to look at her rotten, stinking face, she wasn't such a bad bitch. I gave her the best bleeding years of my life, anyway.
Plug it, will you stupid sod? I'm trying to read the paper.
Listen, I'll chop your spine off. You talk to me like that, you understand? Talking to your lousy, filthy father like that?
You know what? You're getting demented.
The interesting thing, of course, about Pinter's dramaturgy, the way he writes, is from the first he was using three dots, which are a hesitation, pause, which is an emotional stoppage, a transition, and silences, which are complete crises. And they're differentiated very, very clearly. And the actors have to learn them, and they have to learn they're there before they decide why they're there. Now, when I started directing Pinter, the actors were slightly indignant about these pauses set down. They said, I mean, shouldn't we decide where the pauses are when we know how the scene goes? And I would say, absolutely not. You have to understand that the pause is there because it actually is a line. And you may not say anything, but you have to express something. And our task is to find out what that expression is. So I sometimes, in the very early stages of Pinter rehearsals, once they've once they've learnt the shape of the text and where the pauses are, I say to them, now don't use the dialogue to hide your emotion, use it to express it. So play it now melodramatically with the feelings outside. And that, of course, is terrifying. And then they have to bottle all those feelings so that the text contains them and the pauses are the transitions. I remember, Harold never rewrites. He considers his plays down to the last comma. They're immaculate. He wouldn't give you a play that, in his view, wasn't finished. But I do remember when I was doing Old Times, I had a phone call from him after rehearsal one night, and he said, I've got a rewrite. And I said, good God, what do you mean? He said, yes, page 37. So I looked at page 37. He said, second speech, just after it, cut the pause. Now, he said that with a genial smile in his voice, but the extraordinary thing was he was right. With the pause removed, the scene took off. Now, I think you'll find if you watch the film with the text in your hands, that the text is not only accurate, but that the pauses and silences are absolutely well placed and are correct. And, of course, film helped us do that in a rather interesting way, which I think perhaps many people don't quite pick up. Normally speaking, you edit a film, the juxtaposition of shots, according to visual needs, and the dialogue shape is often in counterpoint to that. I edited The Homecoming on the rhythm of the text, on the pauses, on the silences, on the actual shape of the words. And that isn't very often done, and I wouldn't dare do it unless I had an immaculate formed text like Pinter's. But that did pay off, and that gives the film, I think, a very hard edge.
How are you? Look, I'd like you to meet...
How long have you been in this house?
All night.
All night? I'm a laughing stock. How'd you get in?
I had my key.
Who's this?
I was just going to introduce you.
Who asked you to bring tarts in here?
Tarts.
Who asked you to bring dirty tarts into this house?
Listen, don't be silly.
You been here all night?
Yes, we arrived from Venice.
We've had a smelly scrubber in my house all night. We've had a stinking, pox-ridden slut in my house all night.
Stop it. What are you talking about?
I haven't seen the bitch for 9 years. He comes home without a word. He brings a filthy scrubber off the street. He shacks up in my house.
She's my wife. We're married.
I've never had a whore under this roof before. Ever since your mother died, my word of honor.
There is a certain presentational quality about Pinter's language. All his characters use words, love words, and know they're speaking. They're not sloppy with language. They're precise. It doesn't matter whether they're low class or upper class. They have that same quality of precision, and precision is an instrument of conflict almost. I think that you have to be an articulate and clearly spoken actor to make Pinter happen, but more than that, you have to have the courage to allow the inner life to go on inside you so that the pauses and the silences are filled with something. I've seen many productions of Pinter where the actors just stop because he's written pause, but they don't know what's going on in the pause. The pause is a transitional moment emotionally, and it's something that the audience feel in a live theatre instinctively if the actor is really living it through. Now, of course, you can do the same thing on the screen, and we did. The camera loves silence. The camera, I would almost say, prefers silence, because then it can tell us what the face is thinking, and we don't need words. But the interesting thing to me about doing The Homecoming as a film was that the camera enabled us to get closer to the heart of the character. So in a sense, the pauses and silences were perhaps slightly more eloquent than they were even in the theatre. But it's a very, very great discipline to understand that unless you trust Harold's form and try and understand why he wants a pause, why he wants a silence, make an emotional decision, then it can become very empty and pretentious and looks rather absurd. His characters are never, and they are not absurd. The idea that he belongs to something called the theatre of the absurd is preposterous. All his characters have the most accurate behaviour pattern but you have to fill the pauses.
The action is simple. It's a leg. Moving. My lips move. Why don't you restrict your observations to that? Perhaps the fact that they move is more significant than the words which come through them. You must bear that possibility in mind.
Well, Ruth is a gift part, the only woman in the play and the only bringer of femininity into a violently, repulsively male world. You can't really ask for much more of an actress, and it's beautifully constructed and beautifully written. One also has to say, of course, that in those early years of Harold's work, Vivian was his wife and in a very real sense was his muse. And certainly I did 3 or 4 productions with her of Old Times and Homecoming, obviously. She understood his rhythms, she understood his evasiveness, she understood, above all, I think, his irony and his humour. She's quite a piss-taker, Ruth, and she can play the game quite as well as the rest of those cockneys. Piss-taking is, of course, the basis of all Harold's dramaturgy. Anybody who visits London and engages in conversation with a taxi driver should know what piss-taking is. It's mocking you so elusively and charmingly and delicately that you're not even sure you're being mocked. That's what piss-taking is. And Harold's characters do that to each other all the time.
How about me taking a glass without you taking me?
Why don't I just take you?
You're joking. You're in love, anyway, with another man. You've had a secret liaison with another man. His family didn't even know. Then you come here without a word of warning and start to make trouble.
Have a sip. Go on. Have a sip from my glass. Sit on my lap. Take a long, cool sip. Put your head back and open your mouth.
Take that glass away from me.
Lie on the floor. Go on. I'll pour it down your throat.
What are you doing? Making me some kind of proposal?
Of the people who can really speak Shakespeare's verse as something witty, cool, and trippingly on the tongue, fast, which is Shakespeare's own recipe, trippingly on the tongue, Ian Holm was way up there with Judi Dench, Michael Bryant, Diana Rigg, that whole generation, Ian Richardson, I could go on. They all spoke Shakespeare twice as fast as it had been spoken, and very wittily. He's immaculate, Ian Holm, and the reason he's immaculate at Pinter is because he's immaculate at Shakespeare. I think Ian Holm is the definitive Lenny, and he was one of the products of my 10 years at the Royal Shakespeare Company. He was there, I think, for 7 years of that time. And it's extraordinary to think that when he created Lenny, he was always also playing Richard III, the dreadful crookback villain in the Henry VI plays and in Richard III itself. And he then went on to play Prince Hal and Henry V in the Henry IVs and Henry V. So he was the most potent classical actor of his generation at that particular moment. And there he was in Pinter, playing a Cockney spiv with such malice, such sexuality and such wit. I think he's one of the wittiest actors around. I have great admiration for him.
And there she was, up against this wall. Well, just sliding down the wall, following the blow I'd given her. Well, to sum up, everything was in my favour for a killing. Don't worry about the chauffeur. The chauffeur would never have spoken. He was an old friend of the family. But in the end, I thought, nah, why go to all the bother? You know, getting rid of the corpse and all that. Getting yourself into a state of tension. So I just gave her another belt in the nose and a couple of turns of the boot and sort of left it at that.
How did you know she was diseased?
How did I know? I decided she was.
I'm rather neurotic about preservation. I've not made many movies in my life, and I don't think I'm a natural movie maker. I love making film, and of course people always say, but don't you want to make film so that you can leave something behind? I'm not terribly interested in leaving anything behind, really. And I have nothing. I've been a theatre director for 50 years, and I think done now about 350 productions of plays and operas, and I have no record of them at all, and they've gone like soap bubbles. So I wasn't particularly sad to see the Homecoming go, but you know, when the film is got out and reappraised and praised again, and the actors are given adulation for the job they do, of course I feel good about that, and that's very pleasant. But of course, if the Homecoming film exists in 50 or 100 years' time, it will look very old-fashioned and very peculiar, because everything does. The signals that you give out in performing art have to be contemporary, and those signals change. And as they change, we lose touch